Hi there, AGP students. Morgan Pesic here, your SAT reading and writing guru. And today I am talking to you about the writing portion of the SAT and more specifically about improving sentences questions. By the end of today's video, I hope that you will be able to say, I can understand what improving sentences questions are, what the most common types of mistakes in improving sentences questions are, and the strategies I should use to answer improving sentences questions. So first, what are improving sentences questions? They are questions that test your ability to recognize and write clear, effective, and accurate sentences. Improving and revising written English is a pivotal part of successful writing, and you're going to need to know how to do it for the rest of your life. You're going to need to know when you're writing how to make revisions to your writing in high school, in college, and beyond. On the SAT, there are 18 improving sentences questions total between the two multiple choice writing sections, and that's 35.7% of the writing portion. Okay, I'm sure you knew this was coming. I want you to know what the test instructions are so that you don't waste any time on the day of the test reading them. This is what you will be asked to do for improving sentences questions. The following sentences test correctness and effectiveness of expression. Part of each sentence or the entire sentence is underlined. Beneath each sentence are 5 ways of phrasing the underlined material. Choice A repeats the original phrasing. The other 4 choices are different. If you think the original phrasing produces a better sentence than any of the alternatives, select choice A. If not, select one of the other choices. In making your selection, follow the requirements of standard written English. That is, pay attention to grammar, choice of words, sentence construction, and punctuation. Your selection should result in the most effective sentence, clear and precise, without awkwardness or ambiguity. I think the meat of these test instructions are at the bottom. Grammar, pay attention to grammar, choice of words, sentence construction, and punctuation. And we're looking for the most effective sentence. And we're going to talk about what that means here in a minute. Okay, next up we are talking about strategies that you can use for these types of questions. First, read the entire sentence slowly before you look at the answer choices. And we say slowly because if you read quickly, your brain's probably going to autocorrect the mistakes when you're reading it. So if you read slowly, you're more likely to catch the mistakes. Then, if you identify an issue, eliminate answer A, because like we just talked about, answer A just repeats the phrasing of the original sentence. So if you see that something's wrong, A is not going to be your right answer. Remember that the right answer will result in the most effective sentence. So this is what I was talking about. SAT is looking for the most clear and concise. You might have several answer choices that are grammatically correct, but we're looking to be concise. So for correct answers, you're looking for shorter sentences, sentences that are in parallel structure, and sentences that are error-free. So shorter is better. Next, you're going to read each choice along with the entire sentence. Please don't consider the choices on their own. You're going to look at it with the entire sentence. And then look for the most common problem areas in sentences. Noun-verb agreement, parallelism, placement of modifiers, and use of relative clauses. You might know what these things are already, and if so, good. If not, look for the awkward part of the sentence. When you read it, you're like, oh, that doesn't sound right. Couple more strategies. Read all 5 versions of the sentence aloud if possible while you're practicing. So you obviously can't do this on the day of the test, but while you're practicing, it will be helpful for you because your ear may hear the mistake before your eyes see it. It makes for good practice. Substitute all answer choices in. This you can still do on the day of the test, and it is highly encouraged. First of all, it will ensure that you consider all answer choices, but again, if you substitute it in, then you're most likely able to hear which ones sound right and which ones sound wrong. Use your test booklet to help you by marking each question that you don't answer. That way you can find it easier later when you come back to them if you have time. And then just keep in mind that the improving sentences questions go in order from easy to difficult. So again, based on your target score strategy, be aware that you'll probably be skimming and skipping towards the end of the improving sentences questions where they get more difficult. Next, we're going to talk about the most common grammatical errors, and we're going to start first with verb tense. And what this means is these are errors that have to do with when the sentence takes place. If the action of the sentence is happening in the present, then the verb must be in the present tense. If the sentence describes something that has not yet taken place, then your verb needs to be in the future tense. There are essentially 6 verb tenses that you need to be familiar with for the SAT. The simple present, Mary writes a book, typo there, should be an S. Simple past, Mary wrote a book. Simple future, Mary will write a book. We're all pretty familiar with these verb tenses. Perfect present, you speak it all the time, but you might not know it as that title. Present perfect describes either something that has started in the past but is still going on to the present. And it's going to use a past participle, like has or have, and it's used in conjunction with for or since. So Mary has written bestseller books for 10 years. Then we have past perfect, which is when you have 2 finished actions that were in the past but one was completed before the other. Like when Mary published her first bestseller book in 1999, she had already written a number of books by then. And then we have the future perfect, which designates action that will have been completed at a specified time in the future. Like, by December 2014, Mary will have published her 10th book. Okay, the next that you need to know is subject-verb agreement. So, obviously the subject and the verb must agree in number, and we mean singular or plural, for the present tense. And I put this chart together to help you. Singular subject will not end in an S, but a singular verb will. Like in the example, the cat runs. Our subject cat, no S because it's singular, but the verb that goes with it, runs, has to have an S on the end. And for plural, the subject noun is going to end in an S, but the verb that goes with it will not. Like in the example, the cats run. Subject, cats, with an S. Verb that goes with it, run, no S. It would sound weird if I said the cats runs. It even makes us cringe. Okay, there are a couple of other things to remember. For there is or there has, that's going to be with a singular noun. There is plenty of food to go around. For there are or there have, that goes with a plural noun. There have been many questions raised about the handling of the company's finances. Okay, when you have neither nor and then a verb, the verb always agrees with the noun after nor. Like in the example, neither the park nor the lake is owned by the community. Now that's kind of simple because both nouns, the one that came after neither, park, and the one that came after nor, lake, are both singular. But if I put neither the parks nor the lake is owned by the company, then you can realize that it needs to be is, because lake, which comes after nor, is singular. Collective nouns are singular, even though they might sound like they're not. For example, company, school, city, committee. So like a committee is made up of several people, but it acts as one entity, so it's singular. So if you're looking for a verb agreement with that, make sure that you're using single verbs. And then each, every, and other also constitute singular. Okay, next up we have adjectives, and adjectives are modifiers that modify nouns or pronouns and typically come before them, and they typically answer one of the 3 questions: which, what kind of, and how many. So which car is yours? The red car is mine. Red being our adjective. What kind of person is your boss? My boss is a kind person. Adjective. How many? How many children do you have? We have 2 children. 2 being our adjective. Okay, next up we have adverbs, and adverbs are modifiers that modify verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. Here's an example of an adverb modifying a verb. He drove slowly, describing how he drove. Modifying an adjective, he drove a very fast car. What type of fast car did he drive? A very fast car. So fast is already an adjective describing car, and very is modifying the adjective. And then an example of an adverb modifying another adverb, she moved quite slowly down the aisle. Slowly is modifying how she moved, so it's an adverb, and then quite is modifying slowly. Adverbs are usually pretty easy to recognize because many of them are formed by adding ly to an adjective, but be careful because some adjectives also end in ly. For example, that lovely woman lives in a friendly neighborhood. Lovely is modifying woman, so it's an adjective, even though it ends in ly. And friendly is modifying neighborhood, which is a noun, so this is an adjective, and it also ends in ly, so be careful with that. Okay, next we're going to talk about dangling and misplaced modifiers. I've been using the word modifier a lot. A modifier is a word or phrase that describes, or modifies, go figure, another word or phrase. The most familiar types of modifiers that we know of are adjectives and adverbs, which is what I just finished talking about. And when it comes to modifiers, there is only one good place for them to be, and that's as close as possible to the item that they modify. So in this first example, we're looking at a misplaced modifier. He barely kicked that ball 20 yards. Our modifier is right here, this word barely, but it's not in the right place to convey what they're wanting to convey to their reader or speaker, or listener, sorry. If we barely kick something, that would be like to tap it or barely touch it, right? And there's no way that you can barely kick something 20 yards. That's just impossible. What they meant to say was he kicked that ball barely 20 yards. He kicked it, and when he did, it barely reached 20 yards. So unfortunately, sometimes modifiers have this bad habit of slipping into the wrong place in the sentence. Make sure that you're aware of where a modifier needs to go, as close as possible to what you're trying to convey. Okay, and the second example is an example of a dangling modifier. And what that means is, if we are using a modifying word, phrase, or clause, we have to make sure that the thing that comes after it, which is modifying, can be modified by that word, phrase, or clause. And this typically happens when we begin the sentence with a modifying word, phrase, or clause. So here's our example. Changing the oil every 3,000 miles, the car seemed to run better. This is our modifying phrase right here, changing the oil every 3,000 miles. This is what it's modifying, the car. The car cannot change its oil. And last I checked. That would be awesome if cars could change their own oil, but I don't think they can. So this is a dangling modifier because it doesn't actually modify what it's supposed to modify. So we'd have to change it to say something like, changing the oil every 3,000 miles, Fred found he could get much better gas mileage. Fred is the one that is actually changing the oil, or at least going to get the oil changed. So you have to be careful with stuff like that. Next up, most common errors is parallelism. Parallelism is simply using similar structures in a series. And because parallelism puts the contents of a sentence into a recognizable pattern, it just makes it much more easy to read and understand for the reader. And we have an example here. Hawaii is famous for its beautiful beaches, and Montana is well known for its majestic mountains. So Hawaii and Montana are our two subjects, and they are both described with adjectives, famous and well known. And what they are famous and well known for in each case follows with a prepositional phrase, for its beautiful beaches, for its majestic mountains. And there's even further parallelism in that the noun, the object of each prepositional phrase, is modified by an adjective. Beautiful beaches, majestic mountains. And then we have Sharon wanted to have the party at her house on Saturday night rather than in a restaurant on Sunday afternoon. So we have two prepositional phrases, one describing where, the other describing when. and it's word for word parallel. At her house, in a restaurant, or on Saturday night, on Sunday afternoon. And that's the idea, is in general we're trying to balance a word with a word, a phrase with a phrase, and a clause with a clause. It's especially common to find errors in parallelism when we have sentences that have lists, either like a list of actions or a list of items, so look for that. Next up, we have gerunds. Gerunds are a specialized verb form that end in ing. They take the place of nouns and they indicate an action of some kind. So in the sentence, running is an excellent form of exercise, running is a gerund because it takes the place of a noun, it's the subject of the sentence, and it names an action. Now just be careful, not all words that end in ing are in fact gerunds, but all gerunds are going to end in ing. And gerunds often make the sentence unnecessarily wordy and awkward, so it's best to assume that if there is an answer choice that has a gerund in it, it's probably wrong. Okay, some other most common grammatical errors. One is sentence structure with independent clause, dependent clause, and conjunctions. Since we spent so much of the first class going over that, I decided not to hammer it in again. And then passive voice. And we spent so much time with that on the second essay video that I didn't think it was necessary to go over all of that again. But keep in mind the SAT prefers the active voice because the passive voice typically makes the sentence wordier. Okay, now we're going to look at an example. Alice Walker, one of America's best known writers, has published both poetry and prose. And see, here's my mind already auto-correcting. I really need to slow down. Let's try it again. Alice Walker, one of America's best known writers, she has published both poetry and prose. Okay, well I've probably already identified what the problem is. We have this extra pronoun that's just unnecessary because when I read it the first time, I auto-corrected it. I didn't even see it because I know I don't need it. So A is definitely wrong because as it is, it's not right. So anytime you notice something awkward or you notice an error, immediately eliminate A because that's the same exact as what's already in the sentence. B says, and we're going to plug it in, Alice Walker, one of America's best known writers, has published both poetry and prose. Yes, it has gotten rid of that extra she and is still in the correct verb tense. So we can keep that answer choice around for now. Let's look at C, D, and E just to make sure. Alice Walker, one of America's best known writers, and publishing both poetry and prose. Nope, something's not right there. It's not in the correct verb form that produces a incomplete sentence, a fragment. Okay, D. Alice Walker, one of America's best known writers, since publishing both poetry and prose. Again, when we change it to since publishing, now we've made it a fragment. It's no longer a complete sentence. And then E. Alice Walker, one of America's best known writers, when she published both poetry and prose. Same thing as C, D, and E. When we add that when, it just makes it a fragment, not a complete sentence. So that leaves us with B. We just had a case of a redundant pronoun here. We don't need this she in here. Once that's removed, then it's grammatically correct. Okay, example 2. Consumers are beginning to take notice of electric cars because they are quiet, cause no air pollution, and gasoline is not used. Okay, so recognize that the parts of a series separated by commas need to be in parallel structure. They are quiet, they cause no air pollution, and gasoline is not used. This is not parallel. Okay, so that means A is incorrect. The first two items in the series, are quiet and cause no air pollution, are in fact in parallel structure because they use active verbs and they take on the plural subject of they. But the third item, gasoline is not used, it introduces a new subject, gasoline, and it's in the passive voice. So that's what we're trying to fix here. Okay, let's look at B. Consumers are beginning to take notice of electric cars because they are quiet, air pollution is not caused, and gasoline is not used. Remember that we're looking for parallel structure and also active voice over passive voice. For both of those reasons, B is not correct. It's not parallel because we're adding new subjects, air pollution and gasoline, and both these items in the series, air pollution is not caused and gasoline is not used, both of them are in passive voice. Okay, let's look at C. Consumers are beginning to take notice of electric cars because they are quiet, cause no air pollution, and use no gas or gasoline. Yes, this is finally what we're looking for. They both are in active voice and they both can fit with the plural subject they. Let's look at D and E just to make sure there's nothing better. Consumers are beginning to take notice of electric cars because they are quiet, causing no air pollution, and using no gasoline. Okay, these are no longer taking on the plural subject they, so that's incorrect. And lastly, E. Consumers are beginning to take notice of electric cars because they are quiet, air pollution is not caused, and no gasoline is used. Okay, so again, we're really messing up here. This is back to the passive voice and back to adding in different subjects, so E is not correct. That leaves us with C as the correct answer. Okay, and last example before we wrap this video up. The convenience and availability of watercolor paint account for its popularity with amateur artists. This requires you to pay close attention to the plural subject, convenience and availability. So it's a double subject, and so that makes it a plural subject. Okay, so we're not going to eliminate A right off the bat because I didn't hear any errors. It sounded fine to me. Account is a plural verb because it doesn't have an S, and that matches our plural subject, convenience and availability. Likewise, this pronoun its matches the singular noun that it modifies, which is watercolor paint. So far, no problems. Let's look at answer choice B. The convenience and availability of watercolor paint account for their popularity. So the issue here is the pronoun. This is a plural pronoun modifying a singular noun. That can't work. The convenience and availability of watercolor paint accounts for its popularity. All right, other problem. Singular verb with a plural subject. That can't work. The convenience and availability of watercolor paint is why it is popular with amateur artists. Is a singular verb, and that does not match our plural subject, so that's incorrect. Also is just too wordy. The convenience and availability of watercolor paint are a reason for its popularity. We have the right verb here, are, but it's not a reason because it's a double subject, so it should be are reasons for its popularity. And even if C or E said are reasons for its popularity, this is much more concise, account for its popularity, so we would end up choosing A anyway. And sometimes the sentence is correct as it is, so don't be afraid to choose A. Okay, we're wrapping this video up. Hopefully at this point you can say, I can understand what improving sentences questions are, what the most common types of mistakes in improving sentences questions are, and the strategies I should use to answer improving sentences questions. We're definitely going to be getting a lot more practice in class. I will see you then.